I'm Sophie, 28, female, and my parents tried to steal nearly $10,000 from me for a cruise. And when I stopped them, they showed up at my door with a crowbar. It sounds like the beginning of a joke, doesn't it? Or maybe the plot of a movie so unbelievable you de-roll your eyes. But it's my life. It's the culmination of nearly 3 decades of being treated not as a daughter, but as a utility, a resource to be tapped when convenient and ignored when not. My name is Sophie. I'm a financial analyst, and the hardest analysis I've ever had to do was on my own family's balance sheet, where I finally realized I was listed not under assets, but under expendable income. To understand how a disagreement about a vacation escalated to a potential home invasion, you have to understand the soil in which this poisonous tree grew. My family consists of my mother, Brenda, a retired teacher who believes her past sacrifices entitle her to a blank check on her children's futures. My father, Richard, a retired contractor who enables my mother's every whim with a quiet resentment that occasionally boils over into frightening anger. And my older brother, Leo. Leo is the golden child. At 32, he's a struggling artist, a profession my parents find romantic and noble. He is their pride, their joy, the living embodiment of their dreams. He has a wife and two wonderful kids, my niece and nephew, whom I adore. My parents see Leo's life as a beautiful bohemian tapestry. They see my life with its steady career, its 401k, and its carefully planned budget as a stable, boring, but infinitely deep well of cash. The dynamic was set early. I remember when I was 16, I had saved up for months from my part-time job at a grocery store to buy my first car. I just needed a little help with the down payment for a sensible, reliable sedan to get me to school and work. I presented my parents with a binder full of research, payment plans, and insurance quotes. They nodded, looking impressed, but said money was tight. A week later, Leo, who had just totaled his second car in as many years, came home with a shiny, impractical sports coupe. My parents had co-signed the loan and covered the down payment. When I confronted them, my eyes stinging with tears of betrayal, my mother's response was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. "Sophie, honey, it's different," she said, patting my hand. "Leo is a creative soul. He needs inspiration. You're the practical one. You're resourceful. We knew you'd figure it out on your own. We're so proud of how responsible you are." Being called responsible in my family was never a compliment. It was a justification for neglect. It meant I was capable of handling my own problems, which freed them up to solve all of Leo's. The pattern repeated itself through college. They cashed in bonds to pay for Leo's art degree, gallery fees, and studio rent without a second thought. For my finance degree, a field they deemed safe and lucrative, I was guided toward student loan applications. "It's an investment in yourself, sweetie," my father had said, as if their investment in Leo was something else entirely. "You'll make it all back in no time." And I did. I worked incredibly hard. I took extra classes, interned every summer, and landed a great job right out of college. I was diligent, I was frugal, and I was, as they always pointed out, responsible. I paid off my student loans in 5 years. I built up a nest egg. I bought my own small house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I was proud of what I had built all on my own. My financial independence, however, seemed to offend my parents. It was as if my success was a direct commentary on Leo's struggles and they couldn't have that. They started making small, probing requests. "Sophie, could you lend Leo a few hundred for his supplies? The grant money is late." Or, "Sophie, the grandkids need new shoes and Leo's commissions are slow this month." I always helped because I loved my brother and my niece and nephew, but the requests became more frequent, the amounts larger. The true Trojan horse entered our relationship 3 years ago. My parents' furnace died in the dead of winter. They called me in a panic. They didn't have the liquid cash to replace it, and they didn't want to dip into their retirement funds. I understood. It was a real emergency. I paid for the new furnace directly, a cost of several $1,000s. 2 weeks later, my mother called me crying. "What if something else happens, Sophie? What if the roof leaks or the car breaks down? We're getting older, we were so scared." She painted a picture of two elderly, vulnerable people at the mercy of fate. Then came the pitch. Could I possibly give them a credit card just for emergencies? A card they would keep locked in a safe, a safety net for a true crisis. I was hesitant. My financial analyst brain screamed no. But my daughter's heart, conditioned by years of seeking their approval, won. But I applied for a new card, one with a modest limit of $5,000, and gave it to them with a very stern lecture. "This is for life or death emergencies only," I said, looking them both in the eye. "A broken furnace, a medical issue, not shopping, not dinners, not helping Leo." They swore they understood. They hugged me, telling me I was the best daughter in the world. For 3 years, the card went unused. I'd check the balance every month and it was always zero. I started to relax. I thought maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong to be so suspicious. Maybe they had finally started to respect me and my boundaries. That foolish hope was the single most expensive mistake of my life. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was just finishing up a report for work, my mind still swimming in spreadsheets and market projections. My mom's name flashed on the screen, and I answered with a smile, expecting the usual weekly catch-up. "Sophie, guess what?" Her voice was unnaturally bright, a tone I'd come to associate with an impending request. "The whole family is going on a cruise." I blinked, trying to process this. "The whole family? Wow, where are you going?" "The Caribbean, 7 nights," she chirped. "Leo and his family are so excited. We've booked these amazing adjoining cabins and we got the premium drinks package and everything. It's going to be the trip of a lifetime, a real family memory." A knot of familiar disappointment tightened in my stomach. They had planned a massive family vacation, a trip of a lifetime, without even mentioning it to me. I was family, but I clearly wasn't part of the whole family. "That sounds really nice, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I hope you all have a wonderful time." There was a slight pause. "Well, that's why I'm calling, silly," she said with a forced laugh. "We want you to come, of course. We couldn't have a family trip without you." The knot in my stomach loosened, replaced by a flicker of hope. Maybe I had misjudged the situation. Maybe this was a genuine, albeit last-minute invitation. "Oh, well, I'd have to check my work schedule. It's a busy quarter." "Oh, don't you worry about that," she said dismissively. "You can work from anywhere with that computer job of yours, right?" Anyway, I was looking at the ship's map. There's a single interior cabin available on a different deck not too far from us. It's a bit small, but it'll do. So I'm calling to let you know that you can go ahead and book it if you want to tag along. The words hit me like a slap. Tag along, not join us, but tag along. Like a stray dog, they were begrudgingly allowing to follow at a distance, and I was to book my own small, windowless room on a different floor while they enjoyed their amazing adjoining cabins. "Wait," I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place. "Are you saying you've already booked rooms for you, Dad, Leo, his wife, and the kids?" "Of course, we had to get the group rate. It's a fantastic deal," she said proudly. "And you're asking me to pay for my own way separately." The line went quiet for a moment. Her voice, when it returned, was laced with the sharp edge of indignation. "Well, yes, Sophie, we're on a fixed income. We managed to pull things together to treat Leo and his family. You know things are tight for them, but you're doing so well for yourself. We figured you wouldn't mind covering your own costs. It's only fair." It was the family mantra weaponized. My success wasn't a source of pride for them, it was a resource to be exploited and an excuse to exclude me. They were treating my 32-year-old brother and his family to a luxury vacation, but I, the younger daughter, was expected to pay my own way and be grateful for the opportunity to sleep in a closet-sized room far away from them. The injustice of it was staggering. I took a deep breath, picturing the emotional minefield ahead. I could scream and yell, tell them how hurtful and unfair this was. But I knew where that would lead, a torrent of guilt-tripping, accusations of being selfish and ungrateful, and a dramatic, tearful performance from my mother. I had walked that path too many times. This time, I would be the responsible one, the calm one, the adult in the room. "Mom," I said, my voice measured and calm, "I appreciate the thought, but I'm going to have to decline." "Decline?" Her voice shot up an octave. "Why on earth would you decline? This is a family vacation. It sounds like a wonderful trip for you all, and I'm happy for you. But I have a lot of work right now, and honestly, I'd rather save my vacation days and my money for a trip that I can plan myself." "But it won't be the same without you," she whined, the manipulation kicking into high gear. Leo's kids will be so disappointed. They love their Aunt Sophie. I'll take them to the zoo when you get back, I said firmly. My answer is no, Mom. I hope you have a fantastic time, truly. Please send me pic. Adores. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she searched for a new angle of attack. Is this about the separate cabin? We can ask if you can bring a sleeping bag for the floor of our room if you're that concerned about the money. The insult was so profound, so utterly dismissive of my dignity that I almost laughed. No, Mom, it's not about the money. It's about my decision. I've made it. Now I have to get back to work. Talk to you later. I hung up before she could respond, my hand trembling slightly. I stared at the wall of my quiet, empty house, the house I had bought with my own hard-earned money. I felt a strange mix of anger and liberation. For once, I hadn't taken the bait. I had said no calmly and politely and ended the conversation. I hadn't been dragged into a fight. I felt a small, unfamiliar surge of pride. I had protected my peace. I had no idea it was just the calm before the storm. The real battle hadn't even begun. A week passed. I didn't hear from my parents, which was unusual, but I chalked it up to them being busy with cruise preparations, or more likely, giving me the silent treatment as punishment for my disloyalty. I pushed the entire incident from my mind, focusing on a major project at work that demanded my full attention. I worked late, ate at my desk, and fell into bed exhausted each night. The family cruise was a distant, unpleasant memory. It was on a Friday morning that my world tilted on its axis. I was doing my weekly financial check-in, a ritual as ingrained in me as brushing my teeth. I sipped my coffee, logged into my online banking portal, and clicked on the credit card accounts tab. I glanced at my primary card, normal, my travel card, normal. Then I clicked on the statement for the emergency card I had given my parents. My heart stopped. The available credit, which should have been $5,000, was listed as zero. The current balance, which should have been zero, was listed as $9,914.32. I blinked thinking it was a glitch. I refreshed the page. The numbers remained. A cold dread, heavy and metallic, washed over me. I clicked to view the recent transactions, and there it was, a single charge posted 2 days prior. Merchant Royal Caribbean Cruises. Amount $9,914.32. I felt the air leave my lungs. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Had my card been skimmed? Was this a case of identity theft? But the merchant name was too specific, the timing too coincidental. No, this wasn't random fraud. This was a targeted strike. The shaking hand, I clicked for more details on the charge. The description was sickeningly clear: cruise package 5 packs premium SUITES BEVEXCURS. 5 passengers, premium suites, plural, beverage packages, excursions. They hadn't just bought their own tickets. They had upgraded their entire vacation on my dime. They had taken my polite refusal not as a boundary, but as a challenge. They had decided that if I wouldn't willingly give them my money, they would simply take it. And the amount, $9,900. It was far beyond the $5,000 limit I thought the card had. I scrolled down the account details page, my eyes scanning for the credit limit. It was listed as $15,000. I froze. When had that happened? Then I remembered. About a year ago, the credit card company had sent a letter, a generic pre-approved credit line increase based on my excellent payment history and credit score. I'd barely glanced at it before filing it away. My parents must have seen it too. They had been sitting on this information, this weapon, waiting for the perfect moment to use it. The audacity of it was breathtaking, the sheer, calculated dishonesty. This wasn't a desperate act, it was a premeditated heist. They had dangled the insulting tag-along offer in front of me knowing I would refuse. My refusal was the justification they needed. In their minds, I had abdicated my family responsibility, so they were entitled to claim it by force. My shock curdled into a white-hot rage. The coffee cup trembled in my hand. For a moment, I was paralyzed by the sheer scale of the betrayal. These were my parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, to love me unconditionally. They had looked me in the eye and sworn to only use this card in a dire emergency, and then they had used it to fund a luxury vacation behind my back, maxing it out to nearly double the original limit. My financial analyst brain kicked in, overriding the emotional storm. There was a process for this. There were steps to take. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I looked up the number for my credit card's fraud department. The call was surreal. "I need to report a fraudulent charge," I said, my voice tight and thin. The agent on the other end was calm and professional. "Okay, ma'am, can you please verify the amount and the merchant?" $9,914.32 from Royal Caribbean Cruises. Thank you, and you did not authorize this charge." I hesitated. "How do you explain that the thieves are your own parents?" "No," I said, the word tasting like ash. "I did not." "And is your card in your possession?" "No," I admitted, shame washing over me. I had given the card to a family member for emergency use only. They were not authorized to make this purchase. I felt pathetic, like a child who had been duped. "I understand, ma'am," the agent said, though he couldn't possibly. "We see this more often than you'd think. The first step is to freeze the account to prevent any further charges. I can do that for you right now. Then we will open a dispute for the charge. We will contact the merchant to inform them the charge is being contested as fraudulent. In the vast majority of cases where the cardholder confirms fraud, the charge is reversed." "Oh, freeze it," I said immediately. "Freeze everything." As he walked me through the process, a sense of cold, hard resolve settled over me. The hurt was still there, a gaping wound in my chest, but the anger was a shield. They had pushed me too far. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my responsibility for an exploitable flaw. They had made a calculated decision, and now I was making mine. "The dispute has been filed, Ms. Sophie," the agent concluded. "The funds should be provisionally credited back to your account within 24-48 hours while the investigation proceeds." "Thank you," I whispered and hung up. I sat in my kitchen, the silence of the room deafening. The sun streamed through the window, mocking the darkness that had just enveloped my life. My family, my own parents, they had just committed grand larceny against me. And in that moment, I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The next 48 hours were a strange limbo of silence. The provisional credit appeared in my account, and the balance on the emergency card went back to zero, pending the investigation. I felt a grim sense of victory, but it was hollow. I waited for the inevitable phone call, rehearsing what I would say, steeling myself for the tidal wave of fury and gaslighting I knew was coming. It came on Sunday afternoon. My phone rang, and my father's name appeared on the screen. It was unusual for him to call me directly. He was usually the silent partner in my mother's operations. I took a deep breath and answered. "Sophie," his voice was low and gravelly, like stones grinding together. There was no greeting. "What did you do?" "What do you mean, Dad?" I asked, my voice betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Don't play dumb with me," he snarled. "Brenda just got off the phone with the cruise line. They said the payment was flagged as fraudulent. They said the charge was reversed. What did you do?" So they knew I had caught them. Now came the test. I did exactly what anyone would do when their credit card is used for a nearly $10,000 unauthorized purchase, I said calmly. I called the credit card company and reported it as fraud because that's what it was. There was a sputtering sound on the other end of the line. "Fraud, fraud, this was for the family. We were all going to be together. How could you be so selfish?" "Selfish?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. "You stole from me, Dad. You used a card I gave you for life-or-death emergencies to buy premium sweets and drink packages. You did it behind my back after I explicitly told you I wasn't going. How is me protecting myself from theft selfish?" "We were going to pay you back," he yelled, the classic line of every person caught red-handed. "We were going to work something out after we got back." "Pay me back with what?" I shot back, my patience snapping. "With your fixed income, the same fixed income that apparently can't cover a vacation but can somehow magically produce $10,000 later. Do you hear how ridiculous you sound?" "You have no respect," he seethed. "Your mother is in the other room crying her eyes out. You've ruined the one nice thing we tried to do for this family, for Leo, for the grandkids. Their little hearts are going to be broken, and it's your fault. The blame shifting was so predictable, so textbook. It was never about their actions, only my reactions. They lit the fire, but I was the one at fault for calling the fire department. My fault, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You lied to me, you stole from me, you betrayed my trust in the most profound way imaginable. The only person who ruined this trip is you and Mom. You need to call the cruise line and make your own payment arrangements. This conversation is over. I hung up, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had done it. I had stood up to him, to them, without backing down. The victory felt tainted with sorrow. This wasn't some stranger I was fighting, this was my father. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Leo. I hesitated before answering. My relationship with my brother had always been complicated, strained by our differing roles in the family, but we still loved each other. Or so I thought. Saf, what's going on? His voice wasn't angry, just confused and worried. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Mom said you two had a little misunderstanding about the cruise money and you accidentally canceled the payment. She said you were supposed to be helping out but then got cold feet. The sanitized version, of course. They had painted me as the flaky, unreliable one who had gone back on a promise. Leo, that's not what happened, I said, trying to keep my voice gentle. There was no misunderstanding. I told Mom from the beginning I wasn't going and wasn't paying for anything. Then they took the emergency credit card I gave them years ago and charged almost $10,000 to it without my permission. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear one of his kids babbling in the background. $10,000, he finally said, his voice faint. On the emergency card, are you sure? Yes, Leo, I'm positive. I have the statement. It was theft, plain and simple. I had no choice but to dispute the charge. I waited for him to express shock or anger at our parents. I waited for him to say, wow, Saf, I can't believe they did that. I'm so sorry. Instead, he sighed, a heavy, weary sigh. Look, can't you just undo it for now? The trip is in 3 days. The kids have their little suitcases packed. We can sort out the money stuff later. Mom and Dad probably just panicked about the payment deadline. They get confused with this online stuff. My blood ran cold. He was making excuses for them. He wasn't defending me, his sister who had just been robbed. He was protecting the status quo, protecting his free vacation. The golden child was so used to things being magically provided for him that he couldn't even conceive of the providers committing a crime. To him, it was just a misunderstanding. Leo, this isn't about sorting it out later, I said, my voice hardening. This is about them committing a felony. There is nothing to undo. They need to find a way to pay for the tickets they bought. My money is not an option. So you're really going to cancel the whole trip? He asked, a new note of petulance in his voice. Just like that, over some money? It's just money, Sophie. This is our family. It was a punch to the gut. The same phrase my parents used, now coming from my brother, it's just money. To them, it was. It was an abstract concept that flowed from me to them as if by natural law. They didn't see the hours I worked, the sacrifices I made, the discipline it took to earn it. They just saw a resource they were entitled to. It's not just money, Leo, it's respect, it's trust. It's the law, I said, my voice cracking with the weight of my disillusionment. I'm sorry about the kids, I truly am, but this is not my fault. This is on Mom and Dad. Wow, he breathed, all pretense of confusion gone, replaced by cold judgment. Wow, I can't believe you're being like this. He hung up. I stared at my phone, the screen dark. The last thread of hope that I might have an ally in my family had just been snipped. I was completely and utterly alone in this. They were all on the other side of the chasm they had created, looking back at me as if I was the one who had set off the explosion. The cruise was scheduled to depart in 3 days. I didn't know what would happen, but I knew it wouldn't be good. The day of departure was a Wednesday. I woke up with a sense of impending doom, my stomach in knots. I considered turning my phone off, burying my head under the covers, and pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. But I couldn't. A morbid curiosity, a need to see the consequences of my actions through to the end, kept me tethered to reality. I went to work hoping the distraction of my job would provide some solace. It didn't. Every ping of my computer, every ringing phone in the office made me jump. I kept my personal phone on my desk, face down, resisting the urge to check it. Around 11:00 a.m., the first message came through. It was a text from my mother. "Where are you? The cruise people have an issue with our bookings." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. "I'm at work where I earn the money you tried to steal. The issue is that you're trying to pay with a stolen credit card number." In the end, I wrote nothing. My silence was my answer. 20 minutes later, my phone began to vibrate incessantly. A string of texts, one after another, from my mother, my father, and even Leo's wife, who had never messaged me directly before. From Mom, "Sophie, you need to call the credit card company right now and approve the charge. They are not letting us check in." From Dad, "Answer your phone, you are making a scene." From Leo's wife, Amelia, Sophie, please. The kids are crying. I don't understand what's happening, but they're saying our cabin isn't paid for." Then came the voicemails. My phone buzzed, indicating a new message, then another and another. I walked to the office break room, my hands shaking, and pressed play on the first one. It was my mother, her voice a shrill, panicked shriek. The sounds of a chaotic cruise terminal in the background, announcements, rolling luggage, shouting people. "Sophie Elizabeth, you pick up this phone right now. They are telling us our reservation is canceled. Canceled. They are looking at us like we're criminals. This is all your fault, you malicious, spiteful little girl. You have ruined this family's vacation." I deleted it. The next voicemail was from my father. His voice was low and menacing, a terrifying counterpoint to my mother's hysteria. "You did this on purpose. You waited until we were here at the dock to humiliate us. You think you're so smart with your money and your big important job. You are nothing. You are a disgrace to this family. You will regret this, I promise you." I deleted it, a shiver running down my spine. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. The third was from Leo. "Soph, I don't know what your problem is, but you've really crossed a line. Mom is hysterical. Amelia is trying to keep the kids calm. Dad looks like he's going to have a heart attack, all because you couldn't just let it go. You couldn't just be the bigger person. We're standing here with all our luggage and they won't let us on the ship. Happy now." The final message was the one that broke me. It was a short, tearful voicemail from my niece, Lily, who was only 6. "Auntie Sophie, Mommy's crying. Why can't we go on the boat? I wanted to see the dolphins." My own tears started to fall. I leaned against the break room counter, the cold surface doing nothing to cool the burning shame and anger and grief that churned inside me. They had used my niece. They had put her on the phone to emotionally blackmail me. The cruelty of it, the sheer manipulative genius, was astounding. This was the family they accused me of destroying. I splashed cold water on my face, took a few deep, shuddering breaths, and walked back to my desk. I put my phone on silent and shoved it deep into my purse. I would not listen to any more messages. I would not read any more texts. I had made my stand. The consequences were playing out just as they had to. I spent the rest of the day in a fog of concentration, forcing myself to focus on numbers and projections, building a fortress of logic and reason around my wounded heart. When I finally drove home that evening, the silence in my car was a relief. The world felt quiet for the first time all day. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw I had a dozen more missed calls and a flood of new texts. I didn't read them. I walked into my house, my safe, quiet house, and locked the door behind me. I slid the deadbolt into place, an action I usually performed without thinking, but tonight it felt significant. It felt like I was locking them out, not just of my house, but of my life. I knew they weren't on a ship sailing to the Caribbean. They were somewhere back in the city, their grand plans in ruins, their entitlement shattered against the unyielding wall of reality. I felt a sliver of grim satisfaction, but it was buried under an avalanche of sadness. I had won the battle, but in doing so, I had lost my family. Or maybe I was just starting to realize I had never really had one to begin with. I slept fitfully, my dreams filled with the angry faces of my parents and the sound of my nieces crying. I woke up on Thursday morning feeling hollowed out, exhausted on a cellular level. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, the world was carrying on as if nothing had happened. I made coffee, my movements slow and robotic, and tried to convince myself that the worst was over. The humiliation at the dock was the climax. Now would come the slow, painful process of dealing with the fallout, the estrangement, the silence. I was wrong, the climax was yet to come. It started with a sound from the front of the house. A heavy, rhythmic thumpy thump thump, not a knock. It was too forceful, too aggressive for a knock. It was the sound of someone hammering on my front door with their fist. My heart leaped into my throat. I crept from the kitchen into the living room, my body low, and peered through the sliver of glass next to the door. My parents' car was parked haphazardly at the curb, one wheel up on the grass, and on my front porch were my mother and father. They looked nothing like the people I knew. My mother's face, usually arranged in a mask of pleasant martyrdom, was twisted into a snarl of pure rage. Her hair was disheveled and she was pacing back and forth in a tight, frantic circle. My father stood motionless, facing the door. His expression was terrifying. It was a cold blank. Void of fury, and in his right hand, held loosely at his side, was a long steel crowbar. A tool from his contracting days, a tool for prying things open, a tool for demolition. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a family argument anymore. This wasn't about money or a vacation. This was something else entirely. This was a threat. The rational part of my brain, the part that analyzed risk, screamed at me. They had driven here armed with the intent to intimidate me or worse. Sophie, my mother's voice ripped through the morning air, sharp and ragged. Open this door, you think you can just hide from us? You think you can steal our vacation and get away with it? Steal their vacation? The delusion was so complete, so unshakable that it was terrifying. In their minds, I was the thief, I was the villain. You owe us, Sophie, my father bellowed, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the door. You owe us that money, you owe us for the humiliation. Open this door before I open it for you. He raised the crowbar and slammed it flat against the door. Bang, the whole frame shuddered. I stumbled backward, a strangled cry escaping my lips. My mind was a whirlwind of panic. This couldn't be happening. These were my parents, my mommy and daddy, but the people on the other side of that door were strangers, consumed by a terrifying, irrational rage. My hand, shaking uncontrollably, fumbled for my phone on the coffee table. My fingers were slick with sweat. I swiped to unlock it, my thumb mashing the screen. Who do I call? Leo? He would just tell me to open the door and sort it out. A neighbor, what could they do? You will regret this, I promise you. My father's words from the voicemail echoed in my head. He had meant it. My finger hovered over the 911 icon. It felt like the ultimate betrayal, the point of no return, calling the police on my own parents. But what choice did I have? The man on my porch had a weapon and was threatening to break down my door. It didn't matter that he was my father. In that moment, he was a threat to my safety. Bang! Another deafening crash against the door, this time followed by the splintering sound of wood. He was trying to wedge the crowbar into the frame. I pressed the call button. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, a lifeline in my sea of terror. My parents are trying to break into my house, I whispered, my voice trembling so hard I could barely form the words. I huddled in the corner of my living room, as far from the door as possible. Okay, ma'am, what is your address? I gave it to her, my voice cracking. Please hurry, my father has a crowbar. A crowbar? Is he threatening you with it? He's trying to break down my front door, I sobbed. They're screaming at me, they think I owe them money. It's okay, ma'am, I have officers on the way. The most important thing is for you to stay on the line with me and stay somewhere safe. Do not open the door. Can you go into a room and lock the door? Yes, my bedroom. Go now, she commanded. I scurried down the hall, my stocking feet silent on the hardwood floor, and locked my bedroom door just as I heard a loud crack from the front of the house. They were making progress. I could hear my mother yelling, "That's it, Richard. Get it open, she's in there." I hid in my closet, pulling the door almost shut, leaving just a tiny crack to see through. I was breathing in ragged gasps, my entire body shaking. I listened to the dispatcher's soothing voice on the phone as she told me the officers were 2 minutes away, then 1 minute. Then over the dispatcher's voice, I heard new sounds. The wail of a siren, distant at first, then rapidly growing closer. The shouting outside my house stopped. I heard the screech of tires and the slam of car doors. "They're here," I whispered to the dispatcher. "Okay, ma'am, stay where you are. The officers will handle it. Do not come out until they tell you it's safe." I heard a man's authoritative voice from the front yard. "Sir, drop the crowbar, drop it now." I held my breath. There was a metallic clatter as the crowbar hit the concrete porch. Then the officer's voice again, sharp and loud. "Both of you turn around and put your hands behind your backs, now." I heard my mother start to screech. "You don't understand. This is our daughter's house. It's a family matter she stole from us." "Ma'am, you need to be quiet. You have the right to remain silent." Through the crack in my closet door, I watched the surreal scene unfold on my own front lawn through my bedroom window. Two police officers were cuffing my parents. My father was rigid, his face a mask of stone-cold fury. My mother was struggling, weeping hysterically, still trying to plead her case. They looked small and pathetic next to the uniformed officers. A few minutes later, a female officer knocked gently on my bedroom door. "Ma'am, this is the police. You can come out, you're safe." Uh, I slowly emerged from the closet, my legs feeling like jelly. I unlocked the door and faced the officer. She had kind, tired eyes. She saw the state I was in, the tear-streaked face, the trembling hands, and her expression softened with pity. "Are you Sophie?" she asked gently. I could only nod. She led me to the living room. My front door was a wreck. The frame was splintered, the wood around the lock completely shattered. It hung crookedly on its hinges. The sight of it made me feel sick. That was my father's handiwork. "Your parents are in custody," she said. "We need you to come down to the station and give a full statement." She paused, then added, "You're going to have to make a decision about whether or not you want to press charges." I looked at my ruined door, the symbol of the boundary they had tried to smash. I thought of the fear, the voicemails, the years of being treated like a walking ATM. I thought of my father holding that crowbar. The decision wasn't a decision at all. It was an inevitability. It was survival. "Yes," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm pressing charges." The police station was cold and smelled of disinfectant. Giving my statement was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had to recount the entire history, starting with the insulting cruise invitation and ending with the sound of the crowbar splintering my doorframe. I had to play the voicemails for the detective, my father's menacing threat echoing in the sterile interview room. Each word felt like a betrayal, but also like a necessary step toward my own liberation. The detective, a man named Miller with a weary but patient demeanor, laid out my options clearly. "Because they are your parents, we can let them go with a warning for trespassing if you don't press charges," he explained. "But frankly, given the forced entry attempt and the weapon, I wouldn't advise it. This escalated far beyond a simple family dispute. This was criminal." He was right. My fear had been real. The threat had been real. Letting them off with a warning would just send the message that their behavior was acceptable, that they could push and push until they got what they wanted. "I want to press charges," I repeated, the words feeling heavier this time, "and I need a restraining order." Detective Miller nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. "I think that's a wise decision." My parents were charged with attempted breaking and entering, vandalism, and making criminal threats. They were released on bail later that night, paid for, I later learned, by Leo, who drained his own savings to get them out. The call from him came the next morning. I almost didn't answer, but I knew I had to face it. "They are in jail because of you," he screamed before I could even say hello. There was no confusion left in his voice, only pure, unadulterated rage. He had chosen his side. "They are your parents, Sophie. They're in their 60s. You had them arrested over a stupid vacation. What is wrong with you?" "Leo, Dad showed up at my house with a crowbar," I said, my voice flat and devoid of the emotion he was trying to provoke. "He tried to break down my door. They were threatening me." He was upset. He wouldn't have actually hurt you. You know, dad gets angry sometimes. You're supposed to be the responsible one. You should have de-escalated. The irony was crushing. My lifelong label of responsible was now being used to blame me for not managing my parents' criminal rage. I was responsible for their emotions, their finances, their actions, and now for their consequences. It is not my job to de-escalate someone trying to break into my home with a weapon, Leo, I said. My only job was to keep myself safe. I did that. I'm sorry you're in the middle of this, but mom and dad built this road. I'm just watching them walk down it. You've destroyed this family, he spat, his voice thick with venom. You chose money over your own blood. Don't ever call me again. Don't ever try to see my kids again. You are no longer their aunt. You are nothing to us. He hung up, that was it, the final door slamming shut. The loss of my brother, my niece, my nephew, that hurt more than the stolen money or the broken door. That was the wound that would take the longest to heal. In the weeks that followed, I existed in a strange new reality. I had my locks changed and a security system installed. The restraining order was granted, a piece of paper that felt both powerful and flimsy. I communicated with my parents only through lawyers. They pleaded not guilty, their defense being that it was all a gross misunderstanding within a family. But the evidence was undeniable. The credit card statement, the voicemails, the damaged door, the crowbar, the 911 call, it painted a clear picture. Facing a potential conviction, they eventually accepted a plea bargain, 2 years of probation, mandatory anger management counseling, and full restitution for the damages. So my home, they were also legally forbidden from contacting me. My life is quiet now. The silence I once dreaded has become a peaceful sanctuary. I no longer jump when the phone rings. I no longer feel a knot of anxiety when I see an email from a family member. There are no more passive-aggressive comments, no more manipulative requests, no more entitlement. There is just peace. It's a peace that came at a terrible price. I lost my family. I walk around with a phantom limb, a space where my parents and brother used to be. Sometimes, especially around holidays, the grief is sharp and acute. I mourn the family I wished I had, the loving, supportive unit I see in movies and in my friends' lives. But then I look at the life I have built, a life based on my own hard work, governed by my own rules. A life where my worth isn't measured by my bank account. A life where I am not a utility but a person. I am safe, I am respected if only by myself, and I am finally, truly responsible for no one but me. It turns out that's not a burden, it's a gift. So people of YouTube, what would you have done? Am I the bad guy for protecting myself, or were my actions justified? Let me know in the comments.